Welcome to the Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For 50 years now, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, Sean and I sit down with Jill Flygar, who is LSI's newest SVP of Economic Development and Social Impact Work. We're going to discuss Jill's career up to this point, her time in education, and what she experienced and saw at the Utah Inland Port. We're really excited to have her on board the LSI team, so let's dive in.
Well, thanks for doing this morning. I can tell you that even, I think 3 years ago, we had you on this list of top individuals that we want to have participate on the Behind the Wind podcast. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I'm so excited that you're part of our team.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Getting my feet under me and everything, but I'm really excited. I keep jotting down all these things that I want to do, people to connect with, and we'll be getting it going.
That's amazing. I can tell you that if I had to make a list of the rock stars of economic development in the state of Utah, you're at the top of the list.
Thank you, Sean.
I'm so excited that you're part of our team and that we're finally getting to work with you after all these years.
Thank you.
Well, Jill, I've got so much I want to talk to you about, and I'm sure this will be the first of many of these recordings. But before we talk about some of the Utah work and our Utah economic strategy, just can you talk about your background and how we ended up having you as part of our team after all these years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to kind of kickstart and talk a little bit about me, I am a lifelong resident of Utah, born and raised here in Utah. I grew up on the west side in West Valley City. It was Granger when I was young, and became West Valley City when I was about 10 years old. So I just aged myself on this podcast, Sean, but gives a little bit of history of me. And I grew up in a house of educators. My father was an administrator for Granite School District, and my mom was an elementary teacher. She taught kindergarten and first grade. I'd like to say that I lived, seen, and truly believe in the American dream. And that, a long time ago, that was very cliche. Today, I point that out because I'm not sure that this generation really believes in it. They're not really rooted in it. And that's sad for me. And I want to give just a little bit of taste and a little bit of history. My father, he grew up the middle of 9 children. His father was a miner. He worked for U.S. Steel. My grandfather did. And although I only knew my grandfather as, a little bit of a scruffy. He always had that little bit of that scruffy beard, and loving grandfather. He was a little bit of a rough and tumble man because he was a miner his whole life. But my dad always knew that education was the key to success in this country. And when he told his parents and told his older brothers, that he wanted to go to college, he was made fun of a little bit. They were like, why would you want to go to college? You can go to work in the mines and make money immediately. And he did not listen to them because he knew that would be short-lived. And college was the key to success in this country. And he wanted more for his life, and he wanted more for what would be his posterity. And so he went to initially Snow College. He became the student body president of Snow College, where This was the mid 60s, where he met a spirited cheerleader at Snow College, who later became his wife. They transferred to Utah State, where they both graduated in elementary education. And like I said, my mom became a kindergarten and first grade teacher, and my dad taught fourth grade for a while and then later became an assistant superintendent in Granite School District for years. All my years growing up, that's what he did. That's where I learned hard work and education was the key to success. I have multiple degrees, and I credit my parents for instilling in me that value of education. Now, remember, Sean, I already aged myself. So when I was growing up and when I went to high school, women, girls, were not always pushed to necessarily go to college, right? Yeah, that was really cute if you wanted to pursue something outside of high school, but that wasn't something that we were really pushed to do. And so again, I really credit my parents for instilling in every one of their children the value of education. All of their kids, and there's 6 of us, went on to higher education.
Amazing.
And I have multiple degrees. And I want to thank my husband for his patience in allowing me to pursue not just a bachelor's degree, but my multiple master's degree. I always say I never could quite figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up, but I think I've kind of found my passion, and I love public policy and love what I'm doing today.
You know what's funny is coming from that same generation, my parents, on the other hand, every night at the dinner table would say to me, college is a waste of your time and money. I mean, today that would be like considered child abuse, right? They would come in and take those kids out of somebody's home that if they heard, oh my goodness, every night at the dinner table, these parents are saying, this college is a waste of your time and money. And so out of pure rebellion, I was like, I'm going to college. I'm going to go to the university and see what this is about out of pure rebellion. Otherwise, I'm telling you, my parents never paid for any school. They thought I was off the deep end when I decided I'm going to get a college degree. So I had the opposite experience.
Well, and I think, Sean, both of us bleed red. Is that true?
So here's what's amazing. I used to be the only Utah Ute in the whole organization. And now we've collected so many. All of the senior leadership has come out of the University of Utah and bleeds crimson. So that's the other reason I'm excited to have you here.
Well, I love that. I do. All of my degrees are from the University of Utah.
Me too.
Like I said, I have a bachelor's degree in secondary education. So I did start my career in education. I kind of like to say it was the family business. So my grandfather on my mother's side was in education. He taught high school math. And so I spent 10 years teaching high school, the majority of it AP US history, which I absolutely loved. I loved teaching those students about our history, about government, and about politics. And then I got a master's degree in education in curriculum design and went to the University of Utah and taught in the College of Education, spending time teaching pre-service teachers and coaching them through their final year and through their student teaching. Loved being in the classroom with them as they began applying pedagogy, curriculum, and management. That was very rewarding. And then during that time, I started doing some professional development of my own at the U, and I went back and pursued an executive MPA, Master's of Public Administration, diving back into policy work. And during that time, I met John Nixon. I'm not sure if you know John Nixon, but he was the executive director of the the governor's office of planning and budget at the time. And he said to me one day after class, you really should come to work for me. And I said, John, I would love to work for you. What do you want me to do? And he said, I'm going to find you something. Come work for me. And what a rewarding and exciting opportunity that was. I was able to work with some incredible people like Jonathan Ball, Juliet Tennert, Dr. Andrea Wilco, later Chris Cox, Ron Bigelow, and to work with the Utah legislature and to see how our legislative session works, to learn about budgeting throughout the state. And then later, I was taken by the Department of Heritage and Arts and worked with Julie Fisher. And very shortly after, stolen by Val Hale at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And that was just an incredible opportunity at that time. I'm sure now you want to hear all about my time at the Inland Port.
Well, before we do that, let me double
Yes.
click on your time as a history teacher.
Oh, absolutely.
I think this is so interesting. I've got a sophomore daughter who we just had this conversation this last weekend where she's in AP history, AP US history in her high school. And she said to me, just out of the blue, why is this important for me? She's very quantitative. I know that she's going to end up being a scientist. So she said, why is AP US history important to me? And I said, her name's Mary. I said, Mary, this is going to make you interesting. I get to see a lot of individuals that come out of the university and they're boring and they have no foundation and I don't want to talk to them. I have no interest. They can't communicate on anything with me. Tell me about your time as a U.S. history teacher. That is fascinating.
Absolutely. I think that it's vitally important for all of us as citizens of this nation to understand where we've come from. The old adage that if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I believe that. And even if we don't repeat exactly the mistakes of the past, you will see iterations of our past in our future if we don't understand where we've come from. And I also find it fascinating and exacerbating at the same time, the amount of history we don't know. Some of that is simply because the vastness. We're a relatively young nation, and yet there's still so much that is out there that we don't know and we don't tell. I would have a bookshelf in my classroom that would be voluntary reading, you might say. There were certain things that we all have read, and I would have assigned readings, but then I would have a vast bookshelf of voluntary reading that a lot of my students just couldn't get enough of, because there's so much in our history that we just can't get to in a year's time. But we are remiss if we don't continually learn about who we are, people that have come before us, those that have paved the way, and then absorb, learn, and decide for ourselves how we internalize that. There are lots of different perspectives. And I think that in learning, it's not about necessarily indoctrinating. It's about simply having information accessible. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think there is a gap a lot of these kids have in a humanities foundation, and it's making their position in the marketplace weak because they're boring. these, these kids are boring.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they oftentimes have difficulty connecting dots, and history, I think, teaches you that in a way that oftentimes you don't get otherwise. So that I just think that your path to being a part of our team is fascinating. So thanks for sharing that. You obviously must have had some interest in running for office or being a civil servant to pursue this path in a master's of public administration. Tell me your thoughts and what led you down that path.
Yeah. I always thought, and most people who know me and have known me for a while always assumed that at some point in my life that I would run for something. My parents actually have been pretty surprised that I haven't run for something yet.
Even when I knew you back in OMB, I was thinking, just wait, she's gonna be in the Senate, she's gonna be in the House. I mean, I've told this to a lot of people, and then when you went to go it, I said, okay, this is this springboard. But
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
So I haven't ruled it out, and I would
Good,
and I don't rule it out.
good.
It just has not quite been right in my life yet. Politics, the political process has always been my most favorite thing. I I love it. I can't say that I have loved it lately. I think it's been a little bit messy, but it's been messy through our history, right? And I think that's one of the things that is most interesting and that most people don't understand about our history is that politics is messy. And if it was nice, if it was clean, I'm not sure that we would be where we are today. In fact, I know we wouldn't be where we are today if politics was sweet and we all just agreed. We would still be part of England today. It's part of Great Britain. That's just the way it would be. We would still have a British accent and be paying to the Queen. So, or King. Sorry, we're in a new era right now. So, but it's messy, and we have to accept that. I think that we can be kinder to one another. We can be a little more forgiving of each other, but it is messy.
It is. And it's packaged so differently today than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You and I were at the university at the same time, although we didn't know each other then. People are surprised when I tell them that one of my mentors was Ted Wilson, Ted Wilson was a former longtime politician in Utah, mayor of Salt Lake City, and then he went and taught at the university just for fun. And he really taught me a lot about, we did not agree on most politics, but he taught me a lot about being a good politician and what that takes. And I don't know if you had any interface with him when you were there, but he really shaped my thinking in politics in many ways.
Ted is one of my favorite people. I too was lucky enough to take a course or two from Mayor Wilson when I was at the university. And he still is one of my favorite people in the entire world. I also had the opportunity to engage with Ted when I was at GOED, and he served on the board when I was there. And he exudes kindness. He will spend time with you, even if you disagree with him. He just does it in a way in which you are able to have a conversation. instead of combativeness. You are able to go to him and ask him questions and know that he will give you his opinion, but he will also listen to your side. And I always found that I could ask him any question and he would respond with grace.
It was amazing. He taught me a lot, and I really miss him. He was a great individual.
Yeah.
So tell me about this transition from education into being a public servant. That must have been a real transition. And I mean, it's so different going from education into public service.
Yeah. So I left the University of Utah in 2010 and went to the governor's office of planning and budget. Thankfully, I had a little bit of time to get my feet under me before the legislative session occurred. It was August of 2010. However, I was launched directly into budget preparation, and so there was a little bit of baptism by fire when with that being concerned. But I was given some incredible agencies to work with. I worked with the Department of Natural Resources, Agriculture, Public Lands, and the school and institutional trust lands. And they were such incredible organizations to work with. I had Mike Styler at DNR, and he just sort of put his arms around me and said, come learn what we do. I'm going to take you around to all of our divisions. I will give you all the information. Dennis Carver was the finance director, and he was so welcoming. Whatever questions you have, just ask. And they really just welcomed me and gave me all the information that I needed. But it was a baptism by fire, a lot of information very quickly to launch me into the governor's budget. It was Governor Herbert's first budget. And so he, really needed a lot of information. He had been the lieutenant governor, don't get me wrong, he knew what he was doing, but he, was making his recommendations for the first time. And then right into the session. I think because it was Governor Herbert's first go around and it felt a little organic for me to be giving him stuff. That's the best way I can describe it. It didn't seem like it was so overwhelming because things were new anyway with a new governor. And so, but such a great experience, such a great experience. By the time I left 4.5 years later, I was balancing the state budget and going to a state agency where I only had to worry about one budget. I loved that experience because I knew at the highest level how the state worked and how things from this little tiny budget now fed all the way up into the state budget and what they were looking for and why they made the decisions they made and how I could tweak things at the smallest level to ensure that it could get up and be successful. And so that was a great experience to understand at the highest levels how things worked, because you don't get that at an agency level. You're just doing your job day in and day out and hoping that when it gets up there, things work. So that was, I think, one of the greatest benefits I brought to Heritage and Arts, and then ultimately over to GoEd.
Starting there, as you said, it laid a foundation for you going into public service that you would, I mean, even today, that knowledge is so invaluable in the way decisions are made, how programs are perpetuated year after year. You could not have started in a better entry point than OMB, or whatever they call it now. GOMPB, right? Or something. But
all these name changes, they're just confusing.
Sophia, I just learned how to say it was. I still call it OMB. I mean, I know it from OMB, but for you to start there, and you're right, working with some of those individuals, Chris Cox, who I adore, and Jonathan Ball, and John Nixon. I mean, that's amazing mentors for you to move into public service. So you got pulled out of OMB into Heritage and Arts next. And it sort of it sounds like a non sequitur, but in reality, probably when you were there, was Heritage and Arts did it include housing and community development? Had that been divested?
Yeah. So that had been divested and had been altered about a year before.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? So that's an interesting left turn, but tell me about that experience being at Heritage and Arts. I'm sure you learned a lot of interesting things, but it doesn't seem like your path ultimately, but tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I was perfectly content. And I say this a lot where, I'm like very happy. I wasn't looking for a change. Someone comes calling, but I'm so appreciative because I learn things every time. But, I really was happy at what had become OMB. Chris Cox was there. She had made her changes. And, I was also working on federal funds at the time. We had made if I back up just a little bit, when I got to planning and budget, there was a very distinct divide between the governor's budgeting and the legislative budgeting.
Absolutely.
And we were making some really clear and conscious decisions to bring those together, because there's no reason why these agencies should talk to the governor's office and then go talk to the legislative office and have those conversations separate. And so I worked really hard with Yvonne, who was my counterpart on the legislative side, to have meetings jointly, to bring these conversations together. And then once I did that, some of the other policy analysts started doing the same. And Jonathan saw the wisdom in that. Bigelow started to see the wisdom in that. And we were bringing those offices together. I loved the collaboration. I loved working together with Yvonne and Andrea and the two offices. So when I got the call and asked if I'd be interested in talking to Julie Fisher and Brian Summers over at Heritage and Arts, I was like, yeah, I'll talk to them, but happy. So when I got over there, I, started to hear from the grapevine that they had been looking for someone for quite a while, for at least 6 months, and had not quite found the right fit. And Sean, as well as I do, that when you're looking, it's really about fit, almost more than about competency.
Wow.
I was very I should not downplay myself. I was very competent, but it's about fit.
And so just let me pause for a minute. So a lot of people know this, but Julie Fisher, who is one of the people I just absolutely adore. Many people do not realize this. When Julie was in the House of Representatives, in the State House of Representatives, Julie was the one that started and sponsored many of our economic development and social impact initiatives in the House. She ran, prior to the current committee, she had the House Economic Development Committee. She was the chair of that committee and worked with us on so many of our economic development and social impact policy and appropriations in the House and coordinated with the Senate. And then when we were just devastated when she left and got pulled into the governor's cabinet, and then she came to work for us for 10 years. So it's interesting that we've had these connections with some of these organizations over the years.
Yeah. So I went over and I talked to them, and it just felt natural.
That's amazing.
It just felt natural. And so they offered me the position, and I happily went and spent about a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years at the Department of Heritage and Arts. I was the finance director there, helped them really on some more collaborative efforts between their divisions on some efficiency and bringing their finance department together. They were very disparate, and they needed to be pulled together. So I helped on some of those projects. And then during that time, Val was working through their audit and was looking for a new managing director of operations, and sort of the rest of that is history.
Did Julie come to work for us when you were still at Heritage and Arts? I can't remember.
She didn't. It was soon after.
You left, went to GoEd, and then Julie came to work for us. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then you spent a number of years at GoEd working for Val Hell. What an amazing experience there. And what you did to transform GoEd, Jill. I mean, it was, I remember we started working with GoEd from its inception, even before it was GoEd under the Huntsman administration. We were working with economic development, community, and whatever it was called, and then was there when GoEd started. And even by the time you got there, I mean, that organization had been in existence for several years. Mm-hmm. I just saw this transformation when you took over as operations lead for GoEd. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden, there's some structure in that organization. Talk about going into that group that was, it was sort of a bunch of gunslingers in there until you came in and provided this structure. Oh my goodness.
Like you said, GoEd had been around for about 10 years, doing some amazing work. They were bringing in some great companies, doing amazing things. And they just needed some, you said the word, you took the word out of my mouth. They needed some structure. Yeah. And they needed a little bit of accountability around their programs. They had undergone an audit by the state auditor that had some less than flattering things to say about a few things. They had attempted to put into place a compliance office, but the compliance office had one person, and that person was reporting to the corporate recruitment who was pushing out all the money. So the internal controls were lacking just a little bit. And so, what I think in a lot of situations is fresh eyes, looking at an organization that has existed for some time, really just allow the organization to see missing pieces.
I agree.
And that doesn't mean that anything horrible is happening. It just means that we're looking at a higher level at different angles. And so that's what I did, and was able to peel back and put in some broader internal controls and revamp some of the organizational structures and create broader efficiencies throughout the organization. And some of them were painful. Some of them were painful, and change can be painful on individuals. But we made it through. We also had a legacy system. They were using Salesforce. They had been using Salesforce. Well, I'm going to remove the word using. They had Salesforce as a platform in the organization since inception for 10 years, but it was not being utilized. Right. Salesforce is an expensive platform to not be utilized. And I had used Salesforce at Heritage and Arts, so I knew the power of that platform. And so I brought in some people and did some focus groups. What is it that we want from it? How can we better utilize it? And then just stripped down programs to the base and started to build them back up. And I will say that the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity is using Salesforce better than any organization in the state today. And the fact that they have the ability to launch that in lots of different ways allowed them to push out millions of dollars of COVID relief funds across this state so quickly. And I would venture to say better than any state in the nation.
Absolutely. And Jill, okay, I just think you're being so humble in your contribution to this organization. I mean, today, there is no other organization in the state that has the ability to implement new programs from the legislature, from the federal government, from the administration, like the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. And the reason that organization has that ability is the infrastructure that you put into place when you were leading operations there. And and not to mention the fact that all of the leadership there, for the most part, you hired while you were there. I mean, you set that organization up for inevitable success that they could never have accomplished what they've done in the last 3 years without the processes, the infrastructure that you put into place in that organization. It's remarkable. And I think you're so humble about the contribution that you made to GOED, now Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, while you were there.
Well, thank you, Sean. If I had to say or mention a superpower, I would say the ability to handpick employees.
Yes.
I do think that throughout, whether it was GOED or the Port Authority, both of those organizations have incredible staff.
That's right. And you did handpick so many members of both teams. As a partner of GOED while you were there, I saw that, our team saw that. Everybody was talking about how you went in and transformed this organization that had so much potential, which now looking at what GoEO is doing compared to where they were 10 years ago, it is exponential, and they could have never achieved that without your strategy, your processes, the infrastructure that you put into place. And I mean, I saw that transformation over the time that you were there. That was it was remarkable, and it was fun to see. It was, and so I really think it was during that time that I always said, I want Jill on our team at some point. I mean, you can talk to Julie and Corianne and Chris Cox and so many individuals that I've said at some point, Jill's going to join our team. And so here you are. But let's talk about Inland Port. I'm interested to hear your thoughts at Inland Port. You had this great streak with Go Ed, and then I think everybody was surprised when you left. I was surprised when you left Go Ed and joined Inland Port. I mean, I saw the potential, but I really thought at some point you'd be the director of Go Ed. That was sort of the next step I thought for you in your career, was that you would be the director of Go Ed, and then you went to work for the Inland Port. So talk about that move into that organization.
Yeah. So while I was at Go Ed, I was working on the feasibility study for the Inland Port, and that was roughly a year-long project in 2016. And as we all know, 2017, the legislature creates the authority and sets up the board for the Inland Port. During that year, I assisted the board in several aspects that they needed, and that included hiring an executive director. I did several other things like establishing their budget, hiring some consultants, etc. But the big one was hiring the executive director. So they hired Jack Hedge out of the Port of Los Angeles, and Jack comes on board, and I was thrilled to get back to my day job. I was like, thank you. Let me wash my hands of this thing called the Inland Port. We all know what, a dumpster fire train wreck this thing had become.
With so many challenges that at some point I'd love to go through that. I mean, I cannot believe all the things that you encountered after the policy and the appropriation was passed. It was crazy.
Yes. So Jack comes to town in June, and he's new in town. He doesn't know anyone, and he needed a little more support than anyone really anticipated, right? He's the only person running the Inland Port. He was in my office every day. And I'm literally the only person he knows, because I had written his contract. I had helped him with housing needs at the beginning. I set up his paycheck. I did all of these things, and I'm the only person he knows. And so I'm trying to help him hire staff. I'm like, what do you need? And I'm trying to help him hire staff. And he finally says to me, he says, I actually just need someone like you. Just hire me someone like you. And I laughed it off at first. And I'm, trying to post jobs. And he finally, about mid-July and towards the end of July, comes in and says, I'm serious.
Oh my God.
I just want you. And I realized he is actually serious. And I said, well, maybe we should talk about this then. And so he hired me as the chief operating officer of the Inland Port in August. And Val was not surprised, but not happy.
He called me. Val called me and said, oh my goodness, I'm losing Jill. He was in a panic because you were running the show for Go Ed. I mean, wow, that was a huge loss for Val.
So I continued to work for Go Ed until the end of the year, the end of the calendar year. And so I was doing dual jobs and for the next 4 months. We eventually hired Corianne, which then made you not happy.
I mean, I just love this. Hey, Val called me and said, Jill's leaving. I don't know what I'm going to do. Do you know anybody? And then, he hires Corey Ann away from us after all. Corey Ann, who was a rock star at LSI for over almost 25 years,
Yeah.
leaves to take your position at GoEd.
And I will never forget, Corey Ann comes in after we had hired her, and she says to me, she says, "So can you just outline your typical day?"
That sounds
And
like bad.
I first stared, then I laughed, and then I was like, I don't have a typical day. And then months later, she called me and she said, I completely
Whoa.
understand your response now.
And, Corey Ann has said to me so many times that she just had admired your work, and she said it was so easy for her to step in and assume this role as director of operations for GoEd, because you had developed so many of the processes and the protocols and the infrastructure. When I told her that you were coming to work for us, she said she was just enamored with the work that you did. And for her to come in and take over the organization, and the wake of you leaving was just fantastic.
Oh, well, that's very sweet of her. I very much admire her.
So do I.
So it's mutual. So I go to work for Jack. We often laugh. There's thing one and thing two. We were it for a while. And then the irony is that it took us probably a good 8 to 9 months before we actually realized we were Jack and Jill.
So what's funny about that is we were joking about that the minute you went over there. What are we going to do with Jack and Jill?
Oh my gosh. So I said, Jack, please know that I know that you are the executive director, but from here on out, we will be known as Jill and Jack.
But, that was going on day one. We were joking about, what are we doing with Jack and Jill from day one?
The other thing is that you will never forget our names. So when you leave a meeting, no one will ever forget our names. But yeah, it didn't even dawn on us until someone in a meeting said, is there anything else, Jack and Jill? And we both stopped and looked at each other and went, okay, this ends now.
I love it.
So, but we knew the enormity of this project. And at the same time, the two of us had such respect for one another and knew that because of that, we could get this off the ground. From like I said, the early beginnings, we had the protest, there was limited staff. Of course, COVID had to come, right? And then there was limited understanding across the state on intent and purpose. But even with all of that, we were able to sign 20 plus agreements, not just with individuals and companies within our state, but across the region. We had agreements with the Port of Long Beach, the Port of Oakland. We had agreements with renewable energy companies, Rocky Mountain Power, Lancer Energy, Renewable Innovations. We had agreements with so many others that would allow us to move key projects forward to reduce emissions, to transition goods that were moving by truck to rail, that would reduce congestion on our highway system, that would allow companies to move into our into our market to increase supply chain and bring manufacturers into our market. Whatever industry you're looking at, supply chain matters, and how goods move matter. And if you can shorten the supply chain, you reduce your risk in the supply chain, you reduce costs, and it makes things more efficient overall throughout the system. And that is what we really were looking at doing with the inland port.
It's amazing. I look back on the last 13 years, and what people don't realize is that during the last 13 years, Utah has either been number one or number two ranked by Forbes and Inc. and a lot of these national entities as the best economy in the US. And you have been such a part of that in the last 13 years. You have quietly pulled all of the levers to make this, to enable the state to achieve its objective. I mean, Virginia, the state of Virginia is another one of our large clients. And we've thought it's been interesting over the last decade and a half that either Utah or Virginia is number one. And we have always taken a lot of pride in being a part of that strategy to achieve those objectives. But Jill, you have been that quiet force in the state of Utah that has enabled the state to achieve its potential of being the top economy in the US. And for you that now to be a part of our team, gosh, it's such an honor. And I'm excited for this next chapter in your history. As we wrap this up, I want to do there's so much. I didn't even touch most of what I wanted to get to with you this morning, but so we'll do a round two. But could you just talk a little about what you do when you're not working? I know you're a workaholic and that work is such an important part of your identity. I think I say this all the time. I think that's part of our generation, but what do you do when you're not working?
Yeah. So I'm married and I have 3 children. They're grown, but that doesn't mean, we do lots of things together. Sean, I have 8 grandkids.
I cannot believe that. And you're younger than me. You will always be younger than me.
And so I absolutely love that. My middle son lives in North Carolina and he took 5 of my grandkids with him. So I don't speak to him. I'm just kidding. And so they just had my newest granddaughter. She is 1 week old.
Congratulations.
And thank you, little Janie. And so we're going to go see them shortly. But we love spending time with our family. So anything really that allows us to get out into our beautiful state and spend time with family and spend time with those cute little grandkids of ours. So again, if they're not here, we have to go to the East Coast and see them there. We, for the first time, went to Hilton Head back in the fall. It's my new favorite place in the whole world.
Oh,
yes.
I'm so glad you did that. Did you golf while you were there?
What?
Did you golf while you were at Hilton Head?
I did not, but my husband and my son did.
Good.
And we mini golfed. I mini golfed with the little ones.
Okay, we're going to edit this out. No, but you can't say you went to Hilton Head and golf. That's going to be edited out of this.
Okay. Do you know how many mini golf places they have there?
I know, but it's embarrassing. It's like world-class golf, and you're there mini golfing.
It's true. Yes, I saw them all. But they also have the world's best beaches in the whole world.
It is,
and I spend a lot of time there.
It is a beautiful place.
But yeah, so just enjoying our beautiful states, and we love Bear Lake. One of our favorite places to go in the summer, although I keep trying to convince my family that we need to go somewhere warmer. But we do love Bear Lake.
That's great. Well, Jill, this has been so much fun. Thanks for making time to do this. And I'm so happy that you're part of our team. I just can't tell you what an honor it is that you've joined the LSI team. And as our new Senior Vice President of Economic Development and Social Impact, the work that you have done in the state of Utah and elsewhere. I mean, we didn't talk about your connections to the state of California, which is a large client of ours, and other states and municipalities. You are it's going to be incredible. I've heard from hundreds of people over the last 2 weeks when they heard that you have joined our team. They can't wait to connect with you in your new role as the head of our economic development group. So there is no one better to lead this group than you. And with your connections to business development and social impact and your supply chain work that you did, I mean, you have got this unique niche understanding of how economies are built, how ecosystems are built. That is there's very few people that understand this. So we're excited. We look forward to this next chapter in your career, and we'll do a round 2 at some point.
Thank you, Sean. I am thrilled to be here and cannot wait to work with all of the clients and build additional clientele and programs here at LSI.
Thanks, Jill. Take care.
Thank you.